first to start out with, we've got some helpful formulas. Obviously, you start your job by measuring and figuring out what you need. These are pretty basic, most of which you can Google. Tip the top two. The top two is active base is a very, very common one that's needed. Square feet times depth of the base, inches divided by 160. That's going to give you your action base quantity needed. And then street sand, square feet divided by 27 cubic yards per cubic feet divided by 140 cubic tons of sand that's going to be needed. And that's generally at 1 inch depth. Area of a circle, area of a triangle, circumference of a circle, diameter of a circle, all pretty standard. Use those every day. A couple of them that didn't put on there. Area of a square or rectangle, pretty simple, pretty set with. Converting your square feet or inches into square feet, just take your total inches divided by 144. Cubic feet, length times width times height, inches, divide that by 1,728. I know it's a lot of inches, but these are all the three basic formulas that are needed day in and day out. So we want to make sure you have those kind of the starting points as to where we go.
One thing about the back of base, if you don't have house, driveway, or sidewalk that you're butting up against, remember to add 6 inches to all your dimensions. Your pave edge, or snap edge, or aluminum edge has to sit on that base, and those spikes have to go in the base. So don't forget that, because that's a major problem. Because you'll have it all dug out, and you'll be way short. You'll have to reorder.
With that?
Okay.
So proper planning, what are you building? Is it a patio, path, or driveway? This is particularly important because it's going to determine the amount of base you're going to need, but how thick of pavers you're going to need. Certain pavers, depending on their overall size, can't be used for a driveway application because they're not thick enough, they're too large. So that's knowing what you're going into, what you're building. That's going to help determine which paver you're going to want to go with. Proper drainage, always have positive drainage to a designated area, 1/8 of inch slope per lineal foot minimum recommended. Call 811 before digging. Know where your utilities are. I've seen it more often than not where someone hits a irrigation line or a gas line and it just throws everything off. So that's a good one. Plan for your cuts. Estimate the size of your patio. 3 to 10% is pretty typical for the amount of overage that you're going to want to use. I've seen people go as high as 15% if they have a lot of curves. It's just really going to be dependent upon the project you're working on. Drive your stakes into the ground at each edge and attach a string to ensure your proper slope throughout. Then have a plan for all the dirt. I've also ran into that where people dig out and don't know what they're doing with all their excess. Another big one, even in the proper planning portion that I really want to stress is when you get your material on hand, check your material. Check your material, because so many times people get out there and they don't check, they start throwing pavers into the ground, and it's not in your head, you know what I'm saying? It's not the right stuff. So have a plan, talk to your foreman, the designer, whoever, so you know what material is out there, to check it before. And obviously too, when you start laying pavers or even retaining wall block, throw from multiple paver pallets at a time. That's another big one, to ensure that you're mixing up different colors if you do happen to get different lots.
Just to add more on the planning for your dirt, I think that's a really interesting, important part to go with on it. I mean, a 200 square foot patio, you're looking at digging down about 12 inches to factor in the pavers, the dirt, the sand, the base. That is going to give you 7.5 cubic yards of dirt, just doing a 200 square foot patio. So it does add up incredibly quickly. So do have a plan for the dirt. Otherwise, now you're going to have extra labor of grading out the entire area or building a retaining wall that you never bidded on.
I know years ago, a lot of guys did a raised garden because that was pretty decent dirt. They put a raised garden somewhere in the yard to try to find a spot for it, so it didn't have to be hauled out.
Another big thing is just have a plan, an exit plan. I run into that as well, where people place their dirt in an area that they can't get to it. They, just didn't have any forethought, so now they're pulling up pavers to create a path so they can go pull that out to relay it, so. Prepping for a retaining wall. Well, do we have any questions first? So prepping for a retaining wall, first part, dig your trench for your base course 6 inches wider than the block on each side. This will allow maximum stability for that block. Then you want to bury 1 full block. You may need to break the lips off the blocks, depending on what kind of block they are. Not all blocks have lips, but that might be something you might have to look into. Place stakes, or place a stake line from each end across to keep it all uniform. And compact your, usually 6 to 8 inches of base is recommended, but you want to compact that with leveling using class 2 or 3/4 inch minus.
Yep. One thing about your trench, if you're gonna have a plate compactor, you're gonna dig your trench just a little bit wider than your plate compactor. So it's gonna be probably close to 18 to 20 inches. If you don't, where's that hand tamper? You're gonna be Armstrong, you're gonna be doing everything, and that is no more than 1 inch at a time. You gotta tamp it. So if you wanna save time and money, these compactors are cheap to rent.
This thing for 24 hours was less than $100, so it's not bad. Now, if you're doing step-up walls, step up the wall or the base to the height of the previous section.
Like this picture right there in the top left, as you can see. How they stepped up the wall.
So then match a level with dead blow and hammer.
So for laying out your base block, this is the first step we're at here. We're laying down the base course. You have 2 separate options here. You can either use your regular wall block for doing your base course, or you can use a handy base block. Personally, I'm a big fan of the base block for a couple reasons. A, as you can see, it has split lines here. So this one here, as you can see, it overhangs on the wall here. We left this on purpose. Because what you can do is after you fill up your entire wall here, I would then just take my maul and the chisel and split it right there. Very easy, nice and easy to work with. Other reason why the base block is nice is, as you can see, there are these eye lines in it. The eye lines are for lining up your patio to make sure everything's just straight. And then on the front here, we have these extra notches. What these notches here are for is for doing curved lines. So if you wanted to do like a 30-degree course, you'd match up with the second line here. 45, you match with this other line here. And that's what those are for. It's very nice, easy to work with. Second reason why I like this block is you can pound the crap out of it with a dead blow. I mean, yeah, I smack it repeatedly, and I actually haven't broken one yet. I've broken a lot of blocks doing that. Easy way for starting out with your base block that I always recommend. When you compact your base for the leveling pad, you're going to want 6 inches compact. Compact the first 4 inches very well, first 4 or 5 inches. Leave that last inch somewhat loose. You're going to just do kind of a quick rough over it. You don't want it too tense, otherwise it's going to be impossible to pound into it. It's an easy way to start with your block. Slam it down on the ground, kind of slide it back and forth like this to get to your level spot, and then you'll take your torpedo level, a little tiny level, for each individual block. You'll want to go at least 3 different points on your block. After you're satisfied with the level of that one, you then do the next block. Then you'll take your larger level for matching those 2 blocks. After they're matched, take your torpedo on another one. And you just continue this all throughout. This is the most important step of your wall, and this is the longest part of your wall. Laying the base block usually takes about 40% of the entire build time of building a wall. And it's important to stay as level as possible with it. A simple 2-course wall like this, it's not as important. You can get pretty close to level and you'll probably be good. But if you're at that 4-course mark up above that, and if I only have like 1/8 of an inch off, it's going to be really, really bad by the time it gets to that 4th course. So very, very important for that part.
And also, I just want to quick touch base. Usually you bury a full block when you are, if you're using just blocks, not these base blocks. With this base block, you can just bury this and then portion of the next one, so you're not wasting all that extra money on the full block. And then also, this base block can be used for natural stone if you are doing a natural stone wall, so you're not wasting money on burying your first natural stone course.
The other thing that's nice, the manufacturers on the block are making the cores a lot narrower, so when you try to split them, you get real bad splits. We got an example there, and then we use it as a corner. Sometimes you can see the pocket, so we use step lock. But another thing is knocking this bottom lip off to get it level takes a lot of labor, whereas if you use the base block, and if it does have a lip, it's got a line, so when you set that next block on there, it'll take it, slide it into place, and lock it.
Does everyone here know how to start a plate compactor? Or does anyone want a quick rundown on how to use a plate compactor? Yes? Okay. So plate compactors are pretty simple to use. Almost every single one I've seen has exactly the same setup here. You have 3 different levers on this. Top lever, this is your bunny or your turtle speed. Second one here is your forward momentum. Always keep it back when it's not running. Push it forward when you're going to start going. Bottom one is for the gas line. This is to get the gas in it. Always keep it in the off position when you have it off. Switch it on when you're going to turn it on. When you're turning it off, switch the gas back off just so you can burn off all that gas. After you have everything started, there's a red switch here on the front to start it. Pull this to crank it. Don't turn it off by this switch. I mean, if you're renting it, who cares? It's not yours. Turn it off by this switch. But if you own it yourself, turn it off with the gas line just so you can burn off all that excess gas in it. Otherwise, what's going to happen when you shut off by the switch, you're going to hear boop, 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 which is just the gas burning out, which isn't good for the motor. That's how you work this guy. When working your plate compactor on this, my general goal for this is you want to get it to the point where I can safely do a tight turn and only a little bit of it breaks free. Everything's going to break free no matter what, you know, it's just the way it is. And then for doing tight corners, totally comfortable to drive it like this and just use the this. That's how you get around the tight corners. Otherwise, for the really tight gaps, sadly you are stuck using a handy dandy hand tamper. Just be smart with the way you hold it. Don't try to really pound yourself in it, more just take advantage of the weight. All you're doing is lifting and dropping, lifting and dropping.
The other thing is your base should be a little bit damp or moist. If you're getting water coming up as you're compacting, you've got too much base, and if you don't have enough moisture, it won't compact properly. And we had the problem of frozen base even though it was in here for 2 days, so that's why we went ahead and did it ahead of time. Plus it smokes like crazy and we didn't want to gas you out.
And if using recycled concrete, make sure to have it somewhat damp too, like just saying before you start. Now with silica laws and everything, you're going to get in a lot of trouble because obviously it pumps a lot of silica dust in here.
Some good base materials to use. Class 5 is 1 inch minus with fines. Class 2 is a 3/4 inch minus with fines. Some good products to use are limestone, granite, trap, and recycled concrete.
So continuing to the next course.
Question.
Oh yeah.
Soil, dirt, sand, or clay, all the same depth base.
The recommended for retaining walls is 6 to 8, but it is going to be dependent upon your soils. What would you say, Jeff? More is needed for something like sand versus clay?
No, as long as it's compacted, pretty good. Now we've had some, Allen Block used to teach quite a few years ago. If you have a heavy wet soils, sometimes you couldn't get this right out, get it compacted. They have used compacted 3/4 clear, which is the normal backfill behind here. So they use the 3/4 clear underneath the wall and behind it. That's if you have real wet soil.
What did you say that was? 3/4?
3/4 clear, no fines.
Clear.
Yep. So it's a crushed limestone, crushed granite. It has to be fractured or crushed edges. So it locks in. That's what's locking in behind your wall. And it allows drainage. So if you have the fines in it, water gets stuck in there and freeze-thaw cycles will push your wall over and cause problems. You want it free draining. So we've got the base in. Then you'll set your next course, and do not just set the block right on. You actually are going to slide it a little bit because there's concrete residue. It's good to have a whisk broom or a broom and sweeping as you go.
So you're going to want to do an offset laying pattern. meaning you don't want your joints to fall. And that just helps ensure the strength of the wall. Clean your debris off the top of your previous row. That's just going to help with keeping everything level, obviously. Backfill with drainage aggregate behind the wall, adding 6 inches at a time and compacting with hand tamper. Fill the rest of the area with topsoil. When we say rest of the area, we mean the top area behind it. If using core blocks are the ones that are, have a hole going all the way through them. You want to fill those obviously as you're doing each row. And then snap or cut block when needed to keep your cut or split block at the end of the wall, or place it in the middle to stay consistent. Very base block.
So what I meant by that one, sorry, I kind of worded that wrong. What I was saying is snap or cut blocks when needed, but keep the cut split blocks in a consistent order. So what I mean by that is you can either do always on the ends or always in the middle, but just stay committed to how you're going to do it. If you're going to put cuts in the middle, don't put cuts in the end. If you're going to, you get it. Always, it's just going to look really sloppy.
And the reason we're saying that is a lot of times when you do a 90-degree corner, because of using the product, it isn't on bond. So when you turn the corner, you get off bond. And if you've got a picky customer, if you're very detail oriented, by putting a slug or a slab, which you can use as step block or a block, you can cut it within the, say, the first 3 rows of the corner, there's a good chance you get back on bond in the main body.
For your corners, we have 2 different styles of corners. If you guys want to come up and take a peek at it, you're more than welcome. We have inside corners and we have outside corners here. You have to handle each of these cases a little bit different. In an inlay corner, all you have to do is just extend the block. That's it. As simple as that, you're fine. You can bury the backside of it. No one's going to see better. Do not leave a hollow void here or anything. Always, obviously, your wall is not going to be structurally sound. If you want to do a 90-degree corner and you're using diamond block, for example, we will then split one of these step units here. It's a very large 16 by 16 step unit. By splitting it, it adds a second face to it. Does anyone want to try using the splitter?
So we want to use the foot pump.
Anyone curious to try one? No? All right.
Give me some training.
What you'll be doing then is, it's a hydraulic pump. So we're just going to be doing this. I'll get it started. Okay. And then you're just going to put your foot on, just pump it down, and it'll split it. Yep. And there'll be a long. And what's nice now is we've got a corner. So we've got a long and a short edge. What's nice about the step block, you don't have to worry about left or right. They're universal by turning them over. So one step block makes 2 corners for you.
And that's also how you'll do a column too. There's just no need of showing how to do a column. It's the same thing, just instead you lay out 4 of those. And then you can handle these kind of ends here in 2 separate ways. It's up to you. Just like that rule we're talking about, stick with the end or stick with the middle. We stuck with the ends just to demonstrate it. How you could handle this is if you want to instead, you can cut a block smaller in the middle and then keep a full-size step at the end. It's purely a preference thing for what kind of look you're trying to go with. Both are structurally fine. We need to work on that one. I think we're good. Oh, well, yeah, one more thing. Yeah, you don't have to change back. With any of these blocks with lips on it, really simple rule, slide them on, slide them around, just because there's going to be excess concrete on the bottom of them sometime. Good way to break up the debris, and then it'll get caught up in the holes on the bottom. Just a little thing to keep it level.
Okay. Proper drainage. If you've got long walls and you have a lot of water coming, you're going to want to be able to daylight with your through your wall. What we've got is grates in different colors that are 6-inch, which are nice, which works with any kind of 6-inch tall block. If you're going to have your drain tile in, and one thing about drain tile, if you are using it, you can bring your base on the back of the wall up a little bit, so you're daylighting that water out at ground level. So by sloping that base up, any water gets drained through there, will hit that base, catching your perforated drain tile, and kick out and come through that grate. You got a T that hooks up to the 4-inch drain tile, short little piece, and then you've got a nice little grate and all that. We carry charcoal, green, tan, and black. So, but it's very important, and no more than 50 feet. A lot of guys, if they have a lot of water, go every 10 or 15 or 20 feet to daylight it out. Is that what you follow, Chuck?
Every time.
Okay. Because water is your worst enemy, because if it gets stuck in there and freezing, it can blow a wall out real easy. And it's real decent on the finish and all that.
As you can see on the install side, all you do simply is you just skip a block. You just leave a little hollow void here, fill in the gap with the other block, continue. So it's really easy build style. You can see there in that picture. Simple to work
Well,
with.
this is a spot, if it's near a corner, you could also split a step block to try to keep it back on bond so you're on there.
You explained it again, because you want to stay on bonds, not that.
Right.
And not get thrown off.
Right, so what we could do is go in on this corner and put a piece either against that corner where we could split and slide everything over, or put one where we could only go to about here, and then it pushes us over. That's what's nice about having a couple extra step block. Or if you've got a cut-off saw, you can cut one of those blocks and cut it instead of at 17 1/4, 12 or whatever, so you get back. The ICPI recommends at least a third on bond, but everybody likes it because they see their basement walls with their block walls. Every other course is on bond. That's easy when you have mortar and all that. With this, we don't. Just so it's at least a third on bond. Years ago when we were first teaching this, a lot of times if you had a wall, they'd start in the middle and lay both ways if it had corners or a radius. So it could at least, where the pretty part is, it'd be on bond. And then they'd fit their pieces in at the corners or buried into the wall. Did I explain it?
I can't follow it, but
Okay.
I don't want to take up a lot of people's time around that, so I just, there's something.
You
I
can
have to
see
figure
here
out.
we're half on bond.
Yeah, that's half. And when you say
Yep.
a third.
So the
you
next
mean a third
course,
of the way.
the next course when we lay here, by laying this, we'd be back, this next course would lay it right up. So they're following every other course, the lines would line up on a straight wall. But when you put drain tile in, you're changing that because it's 6 inches. So what you do is you can either split a step block or something to get back on bond. It'd be like a spacer or a filler is what you're going to put in.
And then make certain in front of your drain tile point, it does slope down, like in the picture here. Just because you have drain tile and proper drainage doesn't mean you actually have the problem solved. So what's going to happen is then you have all the water just pooling underneath your wall, which is actually probably a worse problem to have. This makes certain you always slope away. If not possible, then sadly you have to install a storm drain in front of it for as long as needed to get to a point that it will just flow away.
Any questions?
Just one other thing talking about that drain in front of there. I've had experience with drains getting plugged up a lot. So I try to do surface drains whenever I get into that, if I can, if I get an option to. So do you recommend like surface drains at the base versus if you got a lot of water coming through, if you install it?
The problem with the surface drain, during the winter months and all that, that ground freezes, and if that starts draining behind it, you're gonna have water spill over. It'd be better if you can get a slope and all that to get it to run away.
Right.
That's why a lot of times people don't always,
That's what I mean, a graded
Yep.
surface.
so a lot of times people will back it away from the driveway and put crushed rock in there where they can slope it. So if it does, instead of draining on the driveway, especially if you have a downspout and hill, otherwise you've got a
Right.
skating rink on the driveway, so what they'll do is go back a ways where they can put some rock in and cut the grade.
Yeah.
Are you using perforated with the sock though?
Pardon me?
Are you using it with the sock?
Yeah.
Oh, really? It makes looking at bunch of
Are you putting a good foot of 3/4 clear rock behind your wall?
I don't install
Okay.
walls a lot, so I'm trying to learn about it.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of it,
If
so
you
that's
do
where I'm coming
a
from.
good foot of that 3/4 clear, you don't get the sediment.
Right, and then you
usually
get the drainage.
Yeah.
I get
So this stuff you wanna do every single month.
And as you're filling up, you go to within, because of the lip, you go within about 2 inches on a retaining wall block that is a lip system. If it's a pin system or a front concrete lip, you go to within about 1 inch. They do recommend if you can compact it, but if you walk back and forth, you're helping compact that 3/4 clear behind the wall. It's very important. You don't want any settling in that. Nope.
So if your wall, most retaining walls, lip systems like this, the max height you can go is about 4 feet. I mean, you can flush that, but 4 feet is about the max height. After you get past that, you really are gonna have to start thinking about engineering and geosynthetic reinforcement. What that does is it helps lock the soil behind the wall into the wall. When doing that, basically, you'll want to, depending on the height of your wall, you want to potentially have it engineered or look into spec guides from the manufacturers. Both RCP and Belgard that we carry offer spec guides that show everything. I prefer Belgard, so until RCP that it's laid out better. It's got a little bit more information. We have these available. They're very, very useful. But
Anything over 4 feet, the city wants.
Well, right, as long as it's just a retaining wall, as long as it doesn't have any pressure on it, a patio, a shed, the house, and good draining soil, not heavy clays, good loose black dirt, sand, but you also run into the grid. They're making molded face block instead of being 12 inches deep. They're only 8 inches deep. So basically at 2 feet, you have to start using grid. And it has a little less of a lip and all that. It gets a little bit more complicated with that. So most of the manufacturers have good instruction and how-to manuals and all that, and we can help and work with you.
How about tiebacks? Anything over 4 feet, do you want to start doing tiebacks in?
That's what the grid replaces the dead bend or tiebacks. On wooden walls, they can go straight up and down, but once those dead bend rot, the wall comes over. What's nice about the grid, it never rots and it's buried in. It's almost like pinching your fingers in the door. It's holding the wall up.
Does it have a book there then?
Nope, it's the pressure of the block
Oh,
that locks it in and holds it in place.
that holds on.
15 or more years ago, 101 and 55, there's a Holiday gas station, that wall came down twice.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And what they did, the contractor got paid, they were supposed to slope, I guess, the parking lot. Well, they sloped it all to the back and all the water ran. But if you notice, the station, the asphalt all stayed there. It was all the grid that they had in there that was help holding the soil up. So the second time they put the same wall up, but there was too much damage. So the third time they actually went down because they couldn't change the drainage. Actually went down 11 feet, poured a footing, and then brought the block up. But the grid was all right there, so they could hook back into the grid. They didn't have to tear the station out.
So the deal was, it held the water when it rolled to the.
It was designed to only take half the water, from what I have heard, but they sloped the whole thing so it all slopes to the wall. It's too much water going through the design.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
when you're laying out your grid, you want to basically lay it out so it's an inch of it is exposed in front of the block, and you put your next block down and you roll it back. Make sure it's not wrinkled, anything like that. And then you backfill over the top of it. Nice little easy trick for that inch that you have up front, a little propane torch, and just go across it. It'll essentially melt it and it'll disappear, you'll never know it's there.
Be careful with your grid. Some is one direction, and you've got to lay it as it comes off the roll. We carry bilateral, means you can lay it this way or you can lay it back, especially if you got to go, say, 5-6 feet. You can take a 3 or 4 foot roll and go back and lay them so they're touching each other. A lot of guys will get our 4 or 6 inch sod staples and just kind of help pull that grid tight until you can get soil and the rock on it compacted. You don't want any slack at all. It depends on the soil. So say, for example, take that one of those point tools.
Alright, so it's going to be harder to explain just because the font came out terribly on here. Here, can I connect that actually? Now we can just pass it around.
Basically, it'll tell you, and what it includes is, if it says it's 4 foot back, 1 foot of that's in the block. So you got to go back 3 feet. So you're digging not only for your backfill rock of about a foot, you've got that soil, and then the soil has to be compacted.
So how the spec guide works is it's split out. Left side's clay and soil, right side slit, gosh dang it. Silt and clay. Jesus, you know what my brain is right now. Clean sand and gravel soil. So how it works is it's all based off of your type here. So let's have everyone pass it around here.
Yeah, do the one with the rock and not the aquaplex.
Other thing just to go through too while I find this page, how me, Matt, and Jeff are able to quickly reference the height for the geogrid. Good rule of thumb for you guys to memorize is 3 times the depth of the block is the general rule. If you're going higher than 3 times the depth of the block, so that 8-inch block, he said 2 feet. You can go 2 feet with that. 12-inch block, 3 feet. That's how that works. So as you can see here, we'll just have everyone pass it around here. It'll tell you exact course heights that you're looking at, how long of geogrid you need, and at which course you put it in. It's incredibly helpful.
And it starts as the base course. You're starting from the base on out.
So you got any more of these?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of those up front.
We
Yep.
just got the brand new one, so. Move on to the next one. Okay. What do you want?
Are we going to live demo it? You wanna? Okay. All right.
What is that?
Capping. So we're doing a different kind of cap style here right now. You've got a couple different styles. You have trapezoidal caps, and then you have the regular rectangular molded cap. Trapezoidal caps obviously rotate every other. It's just the rule of it and everything, just to give you a nice aesthetic look from it. But let's say you're doing a nice fancy curve with it. You have outside curves, and then you have inside curves. When you're doing your outside curves, you want to lay them.
Oh, one more, you got enough.
Yeah, I should be good with this. You want to cut every other for a nice aesthetic look for your wall. You're going to base it whether or not you're doing the long or short side based off of each individual curve. And you see doing every other, you can't really get a nice curve with this. It's just not going to look that great. So good rule of thumb for doing curves is every other block you'll cut. So I do a cap like this, place that one down there, take my chop saw, draw a line on it, and then I will cut it like that. It'll just give you a more aesthetic look. As you can see in this picture here, every other cap is cut. Full size cut. Cut, full, and that's how you just do that entire pattern.
Inside or outside curves?
So yeah, that's how you do curves. There's actually nothing too difficult or anything about it. Step up to the next one, right?
Yeah, but what we can do is also, if you're ending your wall, if you don't like the cap, you can either use the hammer and chisel and put it on a pile of rock, mark a line and take your chisel and take your time and go around and you split it, or rent the splitter so you can make a nice clean 90 like we do the corners.
You just big saw that you gotta give you, a green saw, have that on your back.
Yep.
That
that'd
works
be
great
okay.
for the fill-ins, but on the ends, you want the nice split edge, so you don't want a cut edge.
You go to the next one. Unless anyone else wants to wear anything on? Okay. Step up caps. So back to what we had on display here. You have a couple different options for capping it at the end here if you're doing a multi-tier wall. Also, as you can see, whenever you do cap, very simple rule. You generally want to have a 1-inch overhang. Just kind of has a classier look to it. So we have this here. You can see my face of the block here, which is obviously not the prettiest look, and not everyone's going to necessarily want that. So what you got to do in this case is you have two options here. Some people like to split the block or saw the block just to give it a nice smooth look. Otherwise, the more contemporary, common look that you see these days, what people expect is splitting the cap.
Something that's easier on the block, if you want to make the block, that's when you can use the corner block and the splitter, so you can finish it up. Raise it up. The secret when you use a splitter, you need at least about 1.25 inches, 1.25 inches. You can't split right at the edge of the paper.
Well, what I'm supposed to do is I'll split it a second time here. Should we just grab another one?
I don't just put this on the
So basically, you have your step down.
So yeah, that's how you do step-up caps. After you're done with this, obviously you glue everything down. You don't need to use a lot of adhesive. General rule is 2 quarters, and then you're done.
I took the wall apart one time, the Otten brothers made over there. I don't know who did it, I shouldn't say that. No. Just tell you what, that stuff sticks. It sticks to no end, you gotta use the air hammer to pull it apart.
All good on that side?
Any questions? Did we miss anything on that, Chuck?
What?
Is there anything that we missed on that for the step downs?
Other than breaking the cap.
Jeff, want to go over the different types of retaining walls?
Okay, one way that you can avoid grid is the theory that's 2 times the height of your base wall, which includes the base and the cap. So you got to measure from your base block and to your cap. So say, for example, that measured 4 feet from the back, and remember you got setback from the back of this wall. If you go 2 times, so if you go back 8 feet, you can set the next wall up 4 feet without having to use grid. Anything less than that, then you have to have it engineered and start using the grid. Because if you've ever cut a hill, it never keeps breaking. There's an angle that keeps coming down. And by separating those walls apart, you're past that angle. Otherwise, you're basically building 2 walls, or 1 wall, but 2 different ones. It's the pressure. Does that make sense? Okay? Just remember, it's from the back of the wall. A lot of people say, okay, we're here, measure it. Okay, I got 9 feet. Well, they forget that your block has a setback. You're in that danger zone, so be careful. We showed you on the grids and all that. So if that was only 6 feet apart, you'd have to use grid on both walls. You'd have to treat it as 2 separate walls. You'd have to use the grid on both walls. So it means that it's very important on this base wall that as you're putting this in there, that it's compacted and that grid's tight, because this is depending on that holds, and then this will help hold that wall up. So you've got a lot more excavation when you have to use grid versus if you could move it back.
Jeff, do you just want to explain what each type of wall, what gravity, what that means? That's just.
Well, a gravity wall is the setback and standard. The geosynthetic or reinforced is when we use the grid. Independent terrace means that they're back far enough that they're not part of each other, you're not putting pressure. And the dependent terrace, I don't know what that one is.
That's when the grid, the bottom one, because it works into the back one. That's
Oh, okay.
That's when they're dependent upon each other.
Okay.
Any questions on those? natural stone walls. Natural stone, very, very similar to that of concrete, just note that you don't have any lip on them. So generally, if you're doing a retaining wall, the big rule with doing a retaining wall with natural stones is that you generally don't want to go over 3 times the width of the block. So if it's an 8-inch block front to back, you don't want to go up higher than 24 inches. If you can get a 12-inch block, then you can go up to about 3 feet. But note that you do want to, if you are doing a retaining wall, you still want to do your setback, and you're going to want to have to, or want to glue everything down together.
What's nice about the new sawn height walls, you can do sitting walls now and all that. Because before, when it was natural cleft, it varied 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and 5 to 6, and without mortar and going down to the footing, these are nice. And in general radiuses arcs, you can also split that block with these splitters to get somewhat of a trapezoid shape to do a general arc and radius. And we have 9 different stones that we offer. We have a Chilton, which is 8 inches deep, 6 inches tall, and it shows the bed face, which means it's more the color, like what you'd see on a stepper or a piece of flagstone. Our Fond du Lac has 3, 6, and 9-inch heights. It's a combination of the regular split face that you normally see and the bed face. We have a rustic gold that's 3 and 6 inch. Minnesota Dolomite, which is an 8-inch wall, approximately 3.5 inches tall. We have a New York Bluestone that's approximately 1 inch to 4 inch with sawn heights and split faces. We have the new Lannon, and I said the rustic gold. There's 9 of them that we have. Granite, we still can get granite as an 8-inch wall, so it's a special order with a split.
Any questions about laying natural stone walls? Now we're going to go into, well, any questions about retaining walls in general before we go on to pavers?
Does the best part, like you have long wall, whether it's a straight line or curve, they have any techniques you use to try to keep that all straight or on the same consistent curve?
Well, what's nice is
Other
if you,
than one stone at a time, like you're talking about.
well, if you have that string line, you usually have the string line set up for your base course and your first course. Once you get that straight, you shouldn't need that string line anymore, but you could leave it. Some people put it in the front of the wall and you can trip setting it. If you put it on the back, it can get in the way. But the string line, if you can get your, like I say, your base and your first course nice and straight, and by sliding and make sure they're clean, or with the pins, they'll line up and it should stay nice and straight.
Anything about curves? You got a straight line, now we got a curve. How to keep that consistent and layout, other than just do one piece at a time, hoping you got it right.
On your curves, all these blocks have a taper to them. So once you go into your curve to keep it consistent, just measure your back tips so they're consistent. You'll be back and it'll be 2 3/8 inches, that gap. It'll be 2 3/8. You follow that 2 3/8 inches around, you'll get a consistent curve going.
That makes sense.
And because of the setback, you don't make it the tightest on the base. You've got to add back, and I think it's like 4 3/4 radius. I just say a 5-foot radius, nothing tighter than a 5-foot radius. Otherwise, if you lay the first course tight, you're cutting every block. Because that wedge is getting, because you have the double setback from the front and the side. So keep your radius nice.
Tighter than 5.
Yes. So actually, you should make it, if you're up 4 feet, you almost want to make it about a 6 foot on the base course, because you're losing 1 1/4 every 6 inches. So about 2.5 inches every foot.
Those are good things to know.
Yeah.
What's your take on putting fabric behind retaining walls to separate joints so
When I first started, everybody wanted fabric either right behind the wall or to separate your rock. I've heard of some problems with fines of like the clay getting in there and packing up and holding water. If you have a good foot of clear drained rock, you shouldn't have any problems.
Because I've heard multiple different ways of doing it. fabric behind the wall, then rock, then soils, rock, then
Right.
fabric,
Now, if you have to use
soils,
grid,
rocks,
if you're using grid, you can't put any fabric behind your wall. But the main thing is a 3/4 inch clear crushed rock, a limestone, a granite, a trap rock. You can't use river rock because it's round. You need a fractured edge so it locks in. When I first started, it was 3/8 river rock. Plus ball bearings and all that. And we'd go 1.5 feet, 2 feet or whatever, and it didn't lock in. Once they switched to the 3/4 crushed rock, clear, meaning no fines, it's like a 3/4 down to a quarter. It sits in there and it packs real nice. And when you walk on it, it gets pretty firm.
Okay, so just to shorten the answer, no, it's fabric behind it, just stick with rock.
I've had some people do it the last foot because the people are having a garden and all that stuff, and they'll lay it against the wall and just back far enough so that it isn't polluting the drain field. So then you also have to figure out, they may want you to cut it so you can slide it in the V's, because otherwise you put it against the block. So if you can avoid it against the block, it'd be best. You can always lay it just on top if you want to try to keep your drain field.
Yeah, I never put fabric behind the wall.
Yep.
with rock.
Well, if you look, I got some books back from the 90s that it showed both of those.
And well, this is the 90s.
Yeah. Any other questions?
All right, we're gonna move on to pavers then. Pavers, usually you want about 6 inches of base, that's a standard for paths and patios in this climate. But driveways, wet soils, you can go up to 10 to 12 inches of base or more recommended, just so you're not getting grooves and ruts in your drive supply. 1 inch of sand is still pretty standard. Paver thickness comes into play mainly for the purpose, like we were talking about earlier, the purpose of what you're building. You're going to want a thicker paver for a driveway. Thinner pavers are fine for patios, walkways, pool decks. But it also is going to indicate or factor into how much you're going to be wanting to dig out for your area. You have your base options we talked about earlier, same as retaining walls. The big thing that's different is you're going to want to place woven geotextile fabric at the bottom of your dugout area for soil separation.
What's nice about that is new homes, if they've hauled all the dirt in, it may not have settled. Driveways, if you overdug and didn't get it compacted, you put this down and then your base on top of it, it'll bridge some of that minor settling. It's a cheap investment and it's easy to put in. You'll lay it in and up the sides. I'm going to pass this around so you can see it consistent.
When you're laying your base material for pavers, you don't want to lay more than 2 inches at a time. You want to lay 2 inches compactly, another 2 inches compacted until you get to your desired compacted amount of material.
Recycled then is good for that?
Recycled concrete.
Recycled concrete,
Yep.
which is usually as a class 5, which is the 1 inch minus.
Yep.
And with a plate compactor like this, no more than 2 inches at a time.
And then you're going to want to dig your area 6 to 12 inches out further than the patio. This is there for placing edging and added stability.
So for doing the sand screen, there's a few tools that you need. First tools that you need is 2 1-inch pipes. Sadly, I didn't have any, so I'm using a 3/4 inch pipe and a broom handle, but they'll be close enough to get the idea of it. Second off, you need a spreader. You can use either a fancy spreader like this, otherwise a simple 2x4 gets the job done just fine. That's how I always did in my experience. Next, you need the level. So how this is all going to work is I lay out my 2 pipes here. How I personally like doing the pipes first myself is once again the same thing as the base box. Kind of rub it in as best as you can, just to get that nice loose. It's a little bit harder in a tighter space. The wider space you can do, the better. Personally, I always like doing it as a 2-person team as well, doing like 8 feet at a time. Just makes it go a lot quicker. So what I'll take is I'll take my little separator here, place it on top of my pipes. I'll then take a level, and I will use the, oh, that's actually not too bad. level, keep going through without it, finding any spots that need touching. Alright, so I got a little drop off here. So what I'm going to do then is I take my bucket here with extra crushed sand. Personally, I prefer a pointed trowel, but this will get the job done. And I'll take a second sand one. Simply touch up your pipe where needed, taking a handful. Try to get as much underneath it, and a little wobble back and forth just to get it down underneath there. So when you're laying down your compact base and you level it out, don't worry about this part being level. You're just going to have a terrible time trying to keep this part constant level. Instead, you're more concerned about leveling at this point in time. After you have it all leveled out good enough, you'll then take your sand. Oh, you can't throw sand at my butt. You don't want to get too big with your pile. Preferably you want your sand to be dry. I do have wet sand here. I should be fine.
Should be a little bit damp because what you're trying to do is about 1 inch. And that allows for about a 1/4 inch. That's actually gonna sink. So if you're butting against a driveway or sidewalk, you're gonna be about a 1/4 inch high. So when you run that plate compactor, the extra sand will be forced in the joints to help lock it and set the bed and make it level.
You got it good. Pull it back little bits at a time.
Indeed, you want to show them that on the left-hand side of your screed bar, that notch.
Yeah. These scrape bars do have a second notch if you do the snap etching at the end to grab it. All preference on that. Some people like doing the snap etching right away. Some people like to do it at the very end. Truly, it doesn't really matter. Just stick with your system. Not, you're good. Well, I do this. Can you show them how to handle snap etching on a curve?
Yes. We've got 2 types that we carry in plastic edging. PaveTech has a rigid piece and a flex. The flex is designed for curves only and not straight. They're both 8-foot length. So what you got to do is when you do a curve, inside or outside, for every one of those slots you put a 10-inch or 12-inch spikes. Snap edge is one piece. It comes straight. For an outside curve, you'll take a tin snips or a hacksaw and cut it. And you actually cut 2 pieces out so you can turn the curve with it, or this way. And on curves, you try to put a spike in every slot because you're just on a straight run on the sidewalk. You can maybe go every, say, 8-9 inches or 6 inches. But on curves, it's better, even on a sidewalk or patio, you put a spike in every one because you're displacing that.
One quick little tip with this snap edge, when you're cutting it, you see it's cut at an angle. You want to do that because if you're doing a curve, inside or outside curve, when you twist it, it slides over itself. It's just a quick little easy tip. If you cut it straight down the middle, sometimes it gets jammed up and it won't pass. So if you cut it at an angle, it makes things a lot easier.
So here's how it'll come in a full length.
Now that I got this all fairly scrated back, you'll then start very gently pulling your plumbing forward.
And now is when you're going to want that trowel that he has.
To fill said voids. I like to just fill it as I go, as I lay personally. Once again, this is a preference thing. I'd say it's based off of your crew size. So where I worked, we were just a 3-man crew, so we just kind of went with the flow as we go. If I had a 5-man crew, then yeah, I probably would screed out the whole thing right away. But once again, it's just preference on how your guys' laying speed is.
Any questions at all?
You know, when you put down that base and you get that pretty much thing that's to do, you know. it looks like it'd make it a lot easier to come over with the sand.
And you can't get it perfect because it has either 3/4 and 1 inch, you can get it close. So that sand will help. But the main thing is, with your base, you have the proper pitch and slope. So you gotta make sure it runs away from the house and all that. So your base is important. As you're building in, you're making sure it has that slope.
Let's say you got clay. You got clay, there your whole thing's clay, right? So you're doing this, and then you're kinda in the low spot. I bet that that'd be a good idea to try to get that tiled out someplace, you know what I'm saying?
Well, the water doesn't go through the base, so a lot of times we'll do is people will raise it up their patio area, so it slopes. That, if you have a heavy clay, that's when you use that fabric that we pass around. It's great to tuck it in and bring it up the sides, that'll help. And it will move. My driveway, where I live in Bloomington, is sand. Mine is heaved now because the frost is down about 4 feet. So what's nice is, it's not one piece that heaves, it's a gentle heave, and it usually goes back down. Yes?
So this is the traditional method that we all know and love, but what about newer things like gator base from the Lions? Are you gonna go over that stuff at all, or?
As far as, we're doing the conventional,
Okay.
the basic stuff, that is more like an advanced and all that. We're just doing, everybody over the last 3 years has asked for a basic paver and wall class,
Okay.
so they can send guys, so we're just gonna do the basics and all that, and maybe the next one with advanced, or maybe we can get Belgard and RCP guys to help with that.
Okay.
Because they're also in association with the ICPI, which is for pavers and walls. It's a governing body. Were there any other questions?
So this base you got here, what do you call this on there?
This is a class 2 limestone base. So it's 3/4 down to fines.
It's on the base, what do you guys think is the best base of these choices?
Most of our guys are using the 3/4 because the 1 inch is a little bit harder to grade. But if you've always worked with the class 5, the 1 inch, it's how you do it and all that. Now I have some guys with the walls, will keep some 3/4 clear for the top to get it. You don't want sand. Don't ever use sand on your retaining wall because that can wash out and then you get a fail. Okay?
Just a question on that fabric that you passed around. I got a regular 2-car paver driveway coming up on pretty much all sand base, but with the soil and sand, so it compacts pretty good, but would you use the fabric?
I am one that's extra cautious. Yes, I would use the fabric. It's guaranteed. It's not that expensive. We have different size rolls from 12.5 by 27 up to, what is it? Full roll is like 15 feet by like 400 feet. So, and what you want to do is have enough of an overlap, about a foot overlap, and you bring it up the sides. It's a cheap insurance policy. If you ever have settling and all that stuff, then that means pulling pavers out, pulling sand, compacting, adding some base and all that, where you could save this. And I know a lot of contractors automatically just do this all the time. Do you guys do it all the time now?
Oh, yeah, everything's got it under
So
it.
that goes
permeable?
before the base?
Yes.
Yeah.
It locks it in and you tuck it up the sides and all that. It's not very expensive, and a callback, no matter how much money you make, you usually lose.
Is it permeable?
No, we do have a permeable one for permeable pavers. It's quite a bit more expensive, but it allows the water to perk through. Most of the time, if they use that, you're gonna have to cut a trench when you're digging your base. You can put a PVC pipe to catch it, and you can run it out, or we can give you a quote on the permeable. It's just a different weave, bigger weave, and allows the water to perk through.
That's an issue with lakeshore management, wherever you're doing something by water.
Now, I've got one where they're trying to get it approved where they want to use the grid and a heavy boulder fabric. They want to lay that down first, it's 1 inch squares, and then lay the heavy boulder fabric on there so it permeates all the way through. but it hasn't been approved yet.
By,
Either the watershed district or the city inspection guy. The reason being is boulder fabric isn't structural like this woven is, but what they're hoping is by putting that in, that's structural. By putting that down first and then putting the fabric in there, you're not allowing water, you've got something as a filter back through it, but it hasn't been approved yet.
it's an issue for lot coverage on buildings. And if the space is permeable where water can get through, then it's a credit against the total 25%.
There's still a couple of inspectors around Lake Minnetonka that don't do that. They'll even count your edging as too much hard surface. So that's something you probably have had to deal with it, Chuck.
Oh, you have no idea.
What was that first fabric you said, boulder?
Well, there's a heavy-duty boulder fabric, which is woven, which if you've got that sheet, it's like an 8-ounce, it's a heavy woven. But it hasn't been approved yet, so I don't know if it would pass. Pass it over here.
Okay.
It's the 8-ounce, it says boulder fabric on it, I think.
Well, they make that heavier because they have the holes in between the boulders.
So that's what he was proposing.
Yeah.
Using that grid.
They make a heavy fabric like that because there's holes in between the boulders.
That and durability.
This will be under, you said.
Just doing
No, no, no.
boulders rubbing up against,
No, you're laying.
you know,
grid.
this is
Oh,
standard, you know,
yeah.
3 or 4 ounce rapids, this can tear.
Yeah.
The reason
So we made it thicker just so if you knock it, hold up to the weight.
Fines.
Right.
and stuff.
Right.
Since that's not structural.
Now, Dee, would you say that
Jeff,
but
it's an issue.
this
right
process
now.
would be pretty much the same for doing natural stone cut pattern?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yep, yep.
And so just, if you are doing natural stone, they do have
Jeff.
a,
Okay.
Jeff, would you explain it again? What you was explaining to the gentleman?
What he was doing?
Yeah.
Okay. What they were proposing, it has been approved, instead of using the woven that I showed you guys, taking this grid, which is structural, before you do the base, laying this down and up the side, then there's a heavy 8-ounce boulder fabric, and the reason he wants the boulder fabric is so if water goes through or comes through, no fines are going in to clog up the system. But it hasn't been approved yet. Because he's trying to save some money, because that permeable underlayment is like 3.5 times the cost of the standard stuff.
That's underneath your base.
Then just the standard, yeah, that woven that I passed around. When it says permeable, it's like 3.5 times. And you got a big roll you gotta buy. So driveways, it comes in handy.
So that was that
Need
heavy
more
one on the bottom.
strength.
Yeah.
It says woven.
That's the standard one that we're using. That's the non-permeable one.
So permeable, you need more, the added strength if the other.
No, it's a different weave, so it opens it up, same strength, but allows the water to perk through it faster into the ground. And you've got a whole different base when you do permeable pavers. You don't use any class 2, you use a minimum 8 inches, 1.5 clear, compacted, minimum 4 inches of 3/4 clear, and then a 2-inch choker course of 1/4 inch clear for the setting bed, and that's the same granite chips that you sweep in the joints because the joints are opened up. So it's a completely different animal, and it's hard to get it approved around lakes.
If you use the drainage pipes, would they be perpendicular to your drive off to the side, or just gonna depend on the slope, I suppose?
You have to work with a soils engineer, and he could help you and all that, but they, in the Diamond Manual, they've got, or Belgard, they've got an example showing in here that everybody can pick these up, but it shows. If not, I can get it to you. The ICPI has it on their website too.
they talk about the Belgard.
Okay.
So here's some examples.
Well, that might be.
No, this is in there if you want to do this, or ICPI. That's the Concrete and
Oh, I
Paver
see.
Institute.
Sure.
Well, the regular paver, not the permeable type, that's considered hardcover, isn't it?
Yes,
So like if you have a property that you have to put the permeables down because you have too much hardcover, correct?
yep.
And you said the base on that's gotta be, it's gotta be deeper. You're
And it's
pointing
clear,
your
it's
specs on
clear
it,
rock
clear,
all the way
So the
through.
water can move all the way
Correct.
through.
It's designed to catch the water through the pavers, and it cools it down and helps clean up some of the pollutants and all that. So we're not polluting the groundwater or rivers and streams. But we've gotta sometimes work, Chuck can attest to this, you might have to work with the mini, creek, the watershed, the DNR, the city, and sometimes you have 4 people you're trying to please, or 3 people, and it's really, really hard, because there are no set rules yet in the state of Minnesota of what's approved as a standard.
They don't agree with each other either.
No.
Jovi's handing out these spec guides that we've been referring to. Belgrade RCT, they come out with new ones every year. But for the most part, the information hasn't changed in about the last 10 years now. So you can utilize them from year to year. The big thing that they show in there, aside from its proper install, is they show, you know, the product, how they palletize the product, which colors are available, blah, 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 blah. That stuff changes from year to year, but the meat and bones of it, the install portions are relatively unchanged. So you can, continue to use it year after year.
So we have this slide to show you, they're putting grid down, it's all excavated, it's tucked up the sides, and you're putting the base on it. On some of the commercial sites, they have larger compactors that can do 6 to 8 inches at a time. That's overlapped and tucked up the sides. When you use any compactor, you should go 2 different directions to make sure. And then there's showing proper pitch. And then here's where we're telling you, you can do the geotextile and the 6 to 8 inches over, so your edging, this spike, isn't stable.
The pitch is something I forgot to mention when I was doing the screed. When you screed, make certain your bubble tilts slightly to a direction that you have decided to be your drain.
Away
That's
from the
that 1
house.
inch to the 96 inch
What's that?
kind of slope, and that was the question I'm gonna ask. Just getting the slope right, first you gotta go the right direction.
Yeah.
Not towards the building, I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's 1 inch, like up to 96, is that kind of
Its general rule is about an 1/8 inch for every linear foot. That'll give you plenty of drainage.
And if your customer wants a patio and say it's always wet and standing water in there, they're gonna be raising the grade. Otherwise, it's gonna fail.
Yeah.
Right, Chuck?
Oh, yeah.
And if they won't listen to you, it might be better just to walk from the job. Because you're gonna have problems with the base failing or the pavers moving, and they're gonna expect to be perfect forever.
And one thing I covered too in this picture that does demonstrate well, as you can see, you do have your base go out further than your sand screening. You want to have your stakes going into base, not going into soil. Otherwise, it's just going to be useless. That frost heave is going to break it right away, and it's not going to work. So always have at least an extra 6 inches on every side that you're using edging. Other than in the scenario that Jeff was talking, if you're butting against a house, a driveway, or something
Or like that curve
already
right there.
structurally sound.
Like the curve right there, they had to
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
So let's start putting the pavers. We're gonna start at your outer edge first. Screed the sand as you go, not all at once. It tends to be easier that way. You're not constantly stepping on your sand. Pay attention to your line and level to make sure you do have the proper drainage. Like Steve said, an 1/8 of an inch for every lineal foot out. Stack your paver not too close to the edge to not disturb the sand level. Don't curve the paver so fit an edge. Lay a whole paver with gaps large enough to cut and fit fit paver in. And
Like
then,
that picture showing.
you know,
Lots of small pieces there. Uh-huh.
Well, that's why you do a outside border of a full paver, either as a soldier or sailor. Because if you have those little pieces on the edge, they'll pop, but if you have it held in with a border paver, it won't pop. Another thing is, until you guys get the hang of walking on the pavers, it's good to put down plywood, because anybody turning their foot or stepping can get them out of kilter. So then you may have to pull back and scrape your sand and relay. So plywood is important.
So that picture is definitely doing a curve like that, leaving little individual grooves for doing slivers. There's a second option that you can do. I'll just quickly go to the next slide just to show that way. Other way you can do it is doing little slivers. So it's all a preference style thing. You can either do big gaps like this with multiple cuts, or every single paver, just shave both sides of
Now
it.
if you get the gaps too big, your polymeric sand or sand can wash out.
And then what we meant by not disturbing, so I think this is a great picture for it. That's a huge pile of pavers there that he has pretty close to the edge. General rule is have your stack about 4 pavers in. If you go anything closer than that, more than likely you're going to disturb the sand, and now you're going to have a pissed off foreman, and nobody likes that. So properly stack it. Also, I know this is going to sound redundant, Jason, but proper stacking while running your pavers as well. This is a 3-piece set. I like to do all 3 pieces per a stack. Almost every single paver is set up like this, so you can stack it like this. This way you're having a consistent laying pattern. I know it's going to be easy to go at that pallet and just grab 4 rectangles in a row, 4 squares in a row, 4 Twinkies, but it's just not going to be consistent. If you have more than one runner too, I highly advise have each runner grab from separate pallets as well. Each pallet is going to be a different run potentially, and the coloring can be different. I have seen it before where this whole section is this shade of blue, this whole section is this shade of red, and now you got an angry customer. So it's very important to do proper stacking.
Because you gotta remember, the pavers are built on the pallet by layers, and each pallet's a different run. And they mix sometimes 2, 3, and I don't think they have many 4 colors, but at least 3 colors. So you could get 2 of the colors on one pallet and 3 on the other, so it's good to mix them.
Just a little basic thing here too, just be certain that you know whether or not you're doing a soldier or a sailor course.
Does
Soldier
everybody know what a
course,
soldier and a sailor is?
I don't know what to say.
yeah.
Okay.
So what a soldier is a soldier is like this, where I have it standing erect, like a soldier, standing at attention. A sailor is going to be going sideways, because he sails along the course. Easy way to remember, soldier stands at attention, sailor sails along.
Soldier, sailor. It's very important too to not let your customer change, because if you had figured as a soldier and then they say no, we want a sailor, you're gonna have a bunch of extra pavers. For the border, you might be short from the main body, especially if the border is a pure color and the main body is a mix.
Just enough, just enough. Nah, I got that set there that I can take. Thank you.
So you're using those borders then? Because I got the borders over to your right.
Now I'm just quickly using the Twinkies for it.
Okay.
Be sure about your stepping. Try to step on as many pavers as possible. Don't want to just stand on just this Twinkie, and then you can see I just pressed it in. My whole levels are screwed now. So be smart about your stepping on it. That stacking, like I was saying, I would stack on this center one, but try to cover all 3 at once. While laying pavers, try to avoid long lines. Break up your line as much as possible. You don't want to have a choo-choo train. That's what they always call it. They don't want to see a long line. So alternate your lane pattern. Don't be consistent with it. unless you're doing a running bond, which a running bond will just always have a long line. So just be careful with your customer, knowing which pattern style they're trying to go with.
5-6 years ago, they used to put everything on a separate pallet. So your tender or the gentleman that's carrying for you, that's pull from the pallets and try to keep. It's easier now. There's only a small percentage that keeps them on separate pallets.
Does everyone understand why you don't want long lines? Do you understand everyone?
Oh, actually, what do you mean by that?
So long lines meaning that you got one large seam running right through here. You don't want long seams because that actually, it weakens the integrity of the patio. It gives it more room to move. If you have less lines, or shorter lines that are more breaking up, the friction keeps up together more. It's less likely to keep in one spot.
And that friction is created by the outside edging, your pavers, and the sand that you're going to sweep in the joints.
It's just not the same principle, like if you ever done a concrete driveway, if you've seen a concrete driveway, there's always expansion joints in it. Just long strip of line, that's the break point for when the frost heave happens. That's where your driveway's gonna break, so it won't be a nightmare. Same thing's gonna happen with your pavers if you do a really long line. When that frost heave happens, now you have a break, and nobody wants that.
Nice to have a canister, like it's good to have it straight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
When you do the guys, I don't know where he was the night before, but it looks like this.
And there are some tools that we're going to go over that can help you with your installation. Alignment tools on the underneath the blue rating.
Bad back like I do, quick way to adjust is using this. Just nice simple tip to it. You just put it in between the gaps and then you twist it like that. Versus using a screwdriver, a lot of people just use screwdrivers on site as well. Very easy way to do it too. What's that? Edging shovel, that's how you do it? Yeah.
You always lay, as tight as you get it, or how do you have?
With the built-in
kind of offset on
spacers?
Some layout?
No, these have spacers. Whenever they have spacers, you lay them tight.
Okay.
You lay them in tight and slide them down. Don't put them in and slide them because you're going to get sand in there. So you lay it tight and then put it in. Okay, it's important. Pavers, especially the concrete ones around here, there's 3 sizes. 6 centimeter, which is 2 3/8, 7 centimeter, which is 2 3/4, and 8 centimeter, which is 3 1/8. Be very careful when you're working with your customer that they don't like an 8 centimeter paver for the border, and you have a 2 3/8 for the main body. It's very hard. Now, the 2 3/4 and 3 1/8, for a while they didn't have a lot of border pavers for the thicker one, the 8 centimeter. So that's a little bit easier to add a little bit of sand on the outside because you also have the edging there to help hold it. Oh, you stepped on it. Want a little more sand?
And that's why, like I said, always pick up your paver flaps. I actually picked up my paver at the angle because of that. I put it. So what do you want me to do, man? What do you think?
Oh, just show, leveling how to, it's easier to do it against the wall.
Oh, I
So, one to think about, if you got to do a wall with your pavers, if you can, try to use the straight face block versus the 3-way split, because you've got that 3-way split or beveled front. It's very, very hard to hide the edging if you're going to use edging or the pavers to lock in. What some guys have had to do is get the steel angle iron, put it in, put the spikes in, and then lay the pavers against the block, especially if it's 3-way. But there's a chance that you can see that, and you try to put a little bit of rock in there, it just doesn't look nice. And then other guys years ago used the straight face as their first block coming out of the ground, and then moved to the 3-way split. Some homeowners may never notice that.
after you have it all leveled out, you can just use your deck glove to tighten the caps.
Get as tight as possible.
Very light taps. It's kind of nice to do it on sections that you're standing on too, so that way my weight kind of keeps it from pushing everything else back. What's that?
Keeps it from snapping back.
Yeah. Always. Here, I'll just do a demo what happens without my big fat ass on it. And you see the whole thing starts to tilt. And I'm going through the whole thing. My weight just helps keep it, just adjusting the one that I want to adjust.
Especially if you don't have the etching in or something that you're pounding against.
3-piece patterns, I just have these old worlds here as a simple example of it. There are weird pavers like this that are 3-piece pattern, and what if your customer wants to use this as a border? You can, almost all of these are going to have the same width. You can also factor in that as well. So these, I could actually do a sailor course.
A sailor only.
So even though it's 3 different pieces, it's still a solid border. Yeah. So there's something else to factor in when you're doing your bits and everything.
Any questions? What we showed here is if you really want to do a fancy 90, you can do it a couple different ways.
While on your patio. Use your plate compactor to go over the patio for final packing. Sweep in your poly sand or coarse sand to fill in your joints. Compact over that again to make sure that all that settles and rests correctly. Clean off. If you're using polymeric sand, make sure you sweep and clean off any excess. Otherwise, if you do water that down and it's on the paper, it will stick and it's a pain in the butt to get off. And it will also leave goofy colors that your homeowner probably don't like all that much. And then if you do want to seal it, sealing pavers isn't always necessary. If it's in a high traffic salted area, I would almost say seal it once every year or two, just because those salts are going to destroy those pavers. When we'll start seeing the aggregate right away.
And if you put polymeric sand in, you gotta wait 30 to 45 days for that polymeric sand to cure before you seal it. And it takes a little bit longer in the early spring and late fall for that polymeric sand to hydrate and cure. There are different compactors. The paver manufacturers are pushing the envelope. They're getting bigger pavers and they're not. There's a rule of thumb for what a certain size has to be a certain thickness. They're doing the 2 3/8 pavers and they're getting some big ones up to like 18 inches. Cannot be used for a driveway, but this regular plate compactor can break it. We've got a roller that we rent that will bolt onto this. Doesn't compact it as much, but it more shakes it as it rolls around and compacts it, but you're not breaking pavers. There's also a pad. We rented this from Highway 55. They have a pad that can bolt on with some of these new smooth texture pavers. You slide this with sand on it, you're going to have scratches and you're going to be pulling them up. You put the pad on there and use your blower and blow it off real well, you won't have many pavers to fix.
If you are going to do poly sand, a nice little tip for poly sand, if you're having a hard time with effervescence or hazing going on whenever you do a poly sand, you may just want to change how you apply it. Good tip for doing poly sand, take your bag and lay it flat across the patio, cut a slit at the bottom of it, and then I will just drag and pull that bag until it's completely out of it. Now you only want to sweep it out 3 feet in each direction. Reason why is in polymeric sand, it has a polymer in it. The polymer is an incredibly low dense mineral. So if you sweep it too far, all the polymers are going to settle in the first 5 feet, and now all you are stuck with is the sand and the concrete mix. So you're not going to have a good solidifying process or anything, and that's how you get polymers that get stuck on the surface and everything. So don't sweep your poly sand too far, or you're going to have problems with it.
I've had guys get actual pictures with a funnel, and all I can think of is when they make the funnel cakes. I've seen guys get a hold of that, put their polymeric sand, they can walk and fill the joints up, and you do small areas at a time. It's very important that it gets tamped in and blown off. And you don't bring the polymeric sand all the way up. You keep below the bevel on some of the pavers. It's designed to be recessed, your polymeric sand.
Generally about an eighth from the top of your papers or the chamfer.
So that one, that you used has a chamfered edge, so you would stay down that eighth.
So with the new polymeric sands, especially like the next fill, they're saying to just water the hell out of it. Just get it as saturated as possible.
But it has to be tamped in.
You have to tamp in.
And if you're using it in wide joints or with natural stone, you'll actually take your dead blow and a 2x4 and you're going to be hitting it because you can't tamp flagstone, but you want to use polymeric sand. What they did is got rid of the fines so they're more of the same size. And if you don't tamp it, you may get a gap in your top will set and your bottom won't. And in a short time, either the ants or the all that, it'll fail. And then you'll be pulling it all out and redoing it.
Sealers, are they all created equal?
They are getting real close because of the silica law, that they're all getting real close to being dustless.
Not causing sealer.
Oh, sealer.
Sealer.
Penetrating sealers are the best, but they don't give you color enhancement. A lot of people want either a low gloss or a high gloss. Once you use a low gloss or a high gloss, it becomes a maintenance thing. Every 2 to 5 years, you'll have to reapply it because it's the wet look, it's a surface. Whereas a penetrating one, which helps protect more against salts and oils and grease, you might only have to do it every 3 to 5 or
So
7
you have
years.
just kind of a matte or no visual finish at all with that?
With the penetrating.
Right. Does the glossy one cause more slippage?
No.
Like epoxy floors with drivers? Fall your teeth on a regular.
No, because it does go in the pores a little bit. It is not a film like the old sealers were.
But the penetrating is probably better.
Correct.
Driveway, sidewalk.
Yep. Now, there were a couple tools that we didn't talk about. PaveTech has a line of tools. They have a quick square and all that. So if you don't have the old formula, and we forgot to talk about that, on how to square up, start with a square, is you can go 4, 5, and it should measure 6 to get a 90-degree corner. Or they've got a small and they've got a large one of these, which is pretty nice to make sure you're squaring off the house if you're doing a sidewalk. They also have a nice dead blow. What's nice about this, it's got a real hard rubber side and a poly. Some guys, over time, these split and all the sand or shot run out. That's a lot more expensive, and you do damage the ends, you can reorder those, but that's an expensive one, but we've sold some. PaveTech Probes has a whole bunch of tools. They have a knee pad that hooks in that you can actually, as a seat rest, when you kneel back, you can actually sit and take pressure off your knees. So if you want that, we can show you that, but it's Probes or PaveTech. And then there's different size caulk guns. Any questions? Anybody look through those design manuals and have any questions? Yep.
I understand with this, your display deal, but with that sand, probably should have been up a little higher to get the pavers up.
Correct.
Yeah.
You want to use actual 1-inch plumbing. Like I said, all I have is half-inch here, so
So you
work
figure-
with what you got.
You figure it half inch or an inch
Well, our
up on.
base also, as it thawed out last night, it kind of dropped too. It was pretty well frozen.
But inch up on this,
Yeah, it should have been, at least an inch.
covering the wall at about an inch.
Yep.
So you had your hand up?
Are you gonna talk to them about where and what level the edging would go in at?
Good point. Thank you. We need to kill some time. You got it. Got Papa Granny.
My knees are bad.
Alright.
You gotta scrape the sand down. The edging will be put on your base. It will not be part of the setting of the sand. So Dee's got a margin trowel or a trowel, he's pulling it all back. So it'll sit. The snap edge butts against it. And the pave edge slides underneath it. It's interesting. I learned with this 30 years ago. I got two of my boys in the industry, they use snap edge. As long as the base is put in properly and it's spiked and all that, you can use either or. I had a paver driveway in, I asked the boys to do this, they use snap edge, so. Patio sidewalks, you can use a 10-inch spike. Driveways, most guys are using 12-inch spikes.
This is
I just got it because it was already cut.
Oh my god.
Dee just noticed that it wasn't the same height. We have this that we can get for natural stone that sits down a little bit further.
So what he meant by the height that he mentioned, that's how I know it's right away that this is off. Because you want it to be pretty much halfway up to the height of the paper. This guy was going maybe a quarter inch. So it's like, oh yeah, that's not good. So you want to have proper height and spacing on it. You want it kind of at that height level there too. So you have the option to bring the sod back up to it. People like to put sod right up to the edging. So you kind of want it low enough to it so then you can factor in 1 inch of sod going on top of it.
Do you use pave edge or snap edge?
I use paved deck
Pave edge.
on everything.
Okay.
One of the things when you walk up to a patio now or a sidewalk, and you see these sidewalks that were put in 5 or 6 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and you see that edge and how it frowns down right on the edge, you'll start seeing that more and more, and you'll know that that guy who put that in set that edging on top of the sand, because the sand is eroding out from underneath.
It's a liquid.
It continues to erode, and the pressure on everything over the years will cause that patio to sink a little bit on the edge.
Thank you
That's
for
what-
pointing that out.
And when you're putting it on top of that base, you could just say, I'm not gonna have that problem. So, very important.
But the base comes out probably to where your trowel is, maybe?
Yes, yeah, that's what you kind of want, yeah. And like I said, you can either add the snap edging right at the beginning or right at the end. It's all preference on that point. I just would, personally when we did it, we always added snap edging at the end, but before cuts. So have it all mostly laid out, then put in the snap edging, then start doing the cuts. Because the cuts is where it's going to start getting really tight, Always easier way to handle it.
Yeah, put the edging in, put the border in, and then you'll lay your pavers to that, mark them, and then cut them. You can have the slivers and small pieces, but it's inside, it's being held by a full paver. Just the edging. It'll lock in there. If you put those little pieces on the outside edge, they'll pop out either next year or the year after.
And then just remember now that there's silica lots. Plan a day for cutting and plan a day for drying. You can pretty much only cut now with a wet saw. Obviously you can't do poly sand when your papers are wet. So that's something that you have to factor in on your bidding process as well. That you're going to spend a day cutting, and then sadly nowadays with the silica laws and using wet saws, you've got to go back to that site for an hour time.
There
So
are
factor in your drying.
some machines out there that have the vacuum system that you can dry cut, and I got to try one on clay pavers. We were cutting within 20 feet of a swimming pool, and I was surprised, this was 2 years ago, there was no dust, and nothing was covering right into the swimming pool. And it had a heck of a vacuum on it.
If you're curious of that, that's an IQ Max product. It's about $5,000.
Now, we didn't talk about levels. Chuck, which brand are you guys levels for setting grade and all that, which one are you guys using?
We've had the same levels for so long, I cannot tell you what.
Do you still use the old transit?
Oh, no, we use the zip levels, if you're talking about that.
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
transits are so outdated now. I mean, we've got a unit.
And you
that's called
need
a
two
zip
people
level,
to do it.
and it's
One
just a
site and all
one-person
that.
thing.
And that's the old fashioned with the scope and looking out. That was what we had when we started. You and I started
I
a
used it.
few years ago.
There's only one level measure in USA or any places to go. It's the only one.
Well, I'm trying to think of the one where you can set your grade wherever and it has a 30-foot cord on it.
It's a 100-foot cord on it. It's,
100 foot.
And it gets you within, it says within, you go out 100 feet, you'll still be within a quarter of an inch of what your zero is set.
And one person can set that up.
I had one in my truck the other last weekend, but I'd show it to you, but it's, you set your box here and you don't move it, your recorder just goes out. And you set your zero wherever you want, and you kind of mark that spot and know where it's at, and then it will tell you the height of everything from that zero just by taking that piece and setting it on the ground. It'll take you down a quarter of an inch, a half an inch, something like that. It is a one-man operation.
I've had some salespeople borrow it when they go out to a job site, so they're not guessing, okay, it's 3 steps and you get out there and it needs 8 steps. You know, what's nice is you can shoot that and get your estimate or quote that much more accurate too. And you don't have to do it always on the first one, but maybe on the second meeting you can get out there and no snow. But it's, like you said, accurate within 100 feet.
Yeah, and don't drive on the cords. It's like $300 to get, it's about $1,000 unit, I think. They've come down in price, I think they're down to $800 now. But
they're well worth it.
and if you buy one, you can send it out to be refixed or reset,
Recalibrated.
and it's about $200, $300, I think.
What is name on it?
What?
What is name on it?
It's called a zip level. ZIPLEVEL.
They're usually like a yellow, aren't they?
Yep. We have transits that have not moved for 8 years now, 10 years since we got this.
And those were thousands of dollars too.
Yeah.
By the time you bought the level, the tripod,
Yeah.
and the rod.
I mean, we got one with a scope, we got one with the spinny thing or whatever you don't want to live into.
The laser, yeah, that had the laser on it.
Yeah.
One thing that I did well late that I should explain that I didn't really show, when fixing the level of your pavers, don't fix them like this, fix them like this. So what I mean by that is that it's right in the center, in the middle, with as much of that hammer as possible. Or if you have to compact it to dial in the level. Hit it like this, you're gonna hit a specific spot, and then you just have a lower
And
point.
if you're careful enough with the sand, and you're off, like say an eighth or an inch, when you run the plate compactor, you should be able to correct all that. If you walked properly or had the plywood down. Any other questions, suggestions?
There's something there to fix one out at a time.
Yes. There is,
If you have to add, Sam?
yes, there is a paver extractor which has teeth on each end.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got to use the dead blow to pound it in because they're compacted in, pull it out. If you don't want to spend that kind of money, we've had guys with the little 4-inch grinder cut the paver,
Oh,
hammer it, and then 2 real good flathead screwdrivers, but they won't be used for screws after that. We do rent the splitters. We have a day, a week, and a weekend rate. That one is air assisted, so if you don't want to build up your leg muscles and have a big enough compressor, you can run that off the air. We just had one of our guys split Indiana limestone down to make some border edging, and we built 3 pallets, was it, for you? Yeah.
You also rent the plate compactors, and you could talk about the roller attachment too. I don't know if you guys.
I mentioned that.
Okay.
Also, in some of your deliveries, if your stuff's in the backyard for part of a delivery fee, we can put up to a yard or 1.5 tons of base or sand in a shipping bag. So if you have room and it's level enough, When we run the pavers around or the retaining wall, we can bring shipping bags of product back there so you can shovel instead of having to haul it all the way around if you don't have a bobcat.
Pavers, I do advise too on larger projects that you're going to do in phases. So like, you know, sometimes you only do this patio this year, that patio next year, and so on. When selecting pavers, be mindful of how old that paver is. Pavers regularly get discontinued, colors change very often. I mean, if a paver is on the shelf for 5+ years, that's actually a pretty good life in the paperweight. So factor in those decisions while ordering on projects with multiple phases. May just want to have them just already have the material there, because if they order it in a year's time, it could be a different run entirely and the colors will look different. So it's something worth factoring in as well. There's plenty of times I will have people come in who did a patio 5 years ago and they want to match the paver. I'm sorry, that paver's discontinued. Now their options are either rip it all up and do a new paver or deal with the contract.